Yo, what's going on YouTube, and welcome back to Goal Line Hockey. It's your boy Kevin Forte. Today we are going to be previewing our second round matchup in the Western Conference. The first one we know, which is this series. We don't necessarily know what's going to happen out of the Central Division bracket quite yet. It'll be Colorado and whoever wins between Vegas and Dallas. But today we're going to be going over the Pacific Division bracket, and it is all Pacific teams here, as we've got the Edmonton Oilers and the Vancouver Canucks, a geographical rivalry, a divisional rivalry, even a Western Canadian rivalry. This is going to be an interesting one, and we're going to go over, what my predictions are for this series, of course, and of course, kind of what got these teams to this point, my predictions. We're going to go over all of that today. So, if you like this content, want to see more videos like it, make sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel. So, let's start off with the Edmonton Oilers, who were the first team to clinch their ticket into this series. They had a pretty easy job against the Los Angeles Kings in the first round. For the third consecutive year, they've beaten the Kings in the first round of the series. 3 years ago, they beat them in 7 games. Last year, they beat them in 6. This year, they beat them in 5. The Edmonton Oilers are for real, guys. And listen, I gave them a lot of heat and a lot of hate a couple weeks ago. But they are proving that they are an all-around complete team. And that hasn't been the case for the Edmonton Oilers in the last couple of years. And they're proving it right now. We're seeing the scoring from the guys that need to score. And what's interesting is it's not from Connor McDavid or Evander Kane. It's from guys you would expect, but their production is very, very, prolific. 7 goals in the first round series in 5 games for Zach Hyman. He is doing really well right now. So going into the second round, he is in hot right now. He's well above a goal per game, 7 goals in 5 games. Same thing for Draisaitl. He's got 5 goals in 5 games. So between the two of them, they have a dozen goals combined in 5 games. So the Vancouver Canucks, that defense, they're going to have to make sure they keep an eye out on those two. Of course, you've got Connor McDavid. You've also got some of the depth. And I think this is a guy that doesn't get mentioned a lot because he's not a super big goal scorer on the Oilers. But I think he's really rounded out and completed that center core. Adam Henrique has come in and been a huge, invaluable piece to this group. That the Oilers, listen, one of their biggest acquisitions at the deadline last year was Mattias Ekholm. We'll get there in a second. But this year, bringing in Adam Henrique, really underrated, but really important piece to add to that group. Their defense has gotten much better. I am still looking at that defense and I'm saying to myself, their defense is good, but it's different. And the reason I say that is you look at that roster, right? You look at Cody Ceci, you look at Vinny Desharnais, and you're thinking to yourself I don't know if that defense is really cut out for what they're going to be up against potentially here in Vancouver. And I think this is going to be more of a test for the Oilers' defense because in the first round, a lot of the Kings' top players and their top scorers didn't really produce. Fiala, Arvidsson, Dubois was on the 4th line. So the Oilers were able to shut those guys down, but they were kind of limping their way into the playoffs. I think for the Canucks, this is going to be a little bit different for the Oilers, and I think this is going to be more of a test of what that defense can do. And I'll say that in a second here for the Canucks because I think both of these teams, it's really hard to evaluate their defense so far because the offenses they played against just really weren't all that complete, and we don't really have a sample size. Give credit where it's due to the defense, but I don't know if the opposing offense they were playing was all that formidable. So, and we'll get to that when we look at comparing these two teams' defenses. So, like I said, Edmonton likes to score. Just to give you a recap of the goal scoring in the first round for the Oilers, I mean, yes, 12 goals in 5 games from Hyman and Draisaitl obviously plays a factor in this. But, I mean, just recapping the series. So, in those 5 games, Edmonton scored 7 in Game 1. They scored 4 in Game 2. That was a loss, but they still scored 4 goals. They scored 6 goals in Game 3. They only scored 1 in Game 4, but that was a shutout for Stuart Skinner. And they scored 4 in Game 5. So you combine that, so what is that? So that's 12 goals in the first 2 games, 18 goals after Game 3, 19 after Game 4, and 23 goals in 5 games. That's what 4.5 goals, almost 5 goals per game. That's a really prolific offense. But if you do look, an LA Kings team that isn't necessarily known for their scoring explosion. They scored 4 goals in Game 1, 5 goals, which they won that game, scored 5 goals in Game 2, and they scored 3 goals in Game 5. And then the games 3 and 4 were really good defense by the Oilers, only giving up 1 goal combined while they were in LA for games 3 and 4, which is quite impressive. But the Oilers did show that they can give up goals. And I think what's interesting is I talked a lot about in both of these series how the Canucks and the Oilers, their scoring offenses were really what won them the series. But the other team, which isn't known for their offense, the way they were going to beat the Oilers and the Canucks was going to be playing good defense and winning those 2-1, 1-0 games. Well, the Oilers and the Canucks won those styles of play as well. So it's going to be interesting to see which team is going to be the team that tries to limit the scoring, because I think that ultimately is what's going to win this series. I think the team that is dominating in the goal scoring chart is going to be the team. Yeah, I mean, that's obvious, right? But I think if they're able to dominate their play by scoring a ton of goals and just outscoring the other team, that's going to be the team that wins. Because I think ultimately the team that tries to change up their style and tries to play more defensive minded, and they're going to try and change their way of playing by winning 2-1, 1-0 games. The team that tries to adjust from how they played in their first round series, I think will ultimately be the team that loses this series. Because if you're trying to outscore the other team, I think that could be a problem for one of these teams. And that's going to kind of come up when I talk about my predictions for this series overall. Another key thing in this series, special teams. We have to go over the special teams. I would be remiss if I didn't mention the special teams in this series. So, in terms of everything for the Edmonton Oilers, they went 9 for 20 on the power play. But it looked way worse than that because they are super opportunistic. And it changed the momentum a lot of times during that series when the Oilers would go on the power play. So I think it's one of those things that the power play is going to be in favor of the Oilers here. So if the Canucks can stay out of the box, I think that's going to be pretty important, because I think the way that the Oilers play, they're a team that likes to cause problems. They like the 4-on-4, 5-on-3, 5-on-4 hockey. It opens up the ice for their star players. It opens up the ice for Draisaitl, McDavid, and even Zach Hyman. Never thought I would be saying that. But even guys like Evan Bouchard and Matthias Ekholm on the back end, it opens up the ice for those guys and allows them to play their game. And I think that's an advantage for the Oilers. And that kind of leads me to the second part, which, kind of evaluating the power play for the Oilers. The penalty situation is going to be pivotal, because there were points in the series where the Oilers were able to really take advantage of, kind of the ticky-tack calls going in their favor against the Kings. And I'm not going to blame the refs for the Oilers winning the series. The Oilers were absolutely the better team in that first-round matchup. But I think the officiating was in favor of the Oilers at points, and they took advantage of it. So for the Canucks, got to avoid the penalties. And I'm kind of talking about guys like Nikita Zadorov, right? You got to stay out of the box. Niels Höglander got a little aggressive as that series went along. He wasn't scoring a ton, so keep an eye on him, potentially being more of a agitator, a rough guy in that series. There's no more Alex Burrows there in Vancouver, thank God for the Oilers fans. But I think that's something that the Canucks have to be careful of, is avoiding getting involved in the chippy stuff with the Oilers. Evander Kane's going to maybe try and do that as well. He wasn't super prolific in this series in terms of goal scoring. I think he's going to want to get noticed by laying some big hits on guys like Quinn Hughes and Pettersson and some guys like that, agitating them and maybe sending them to the box. Like I said, that's going to favor the Oilers in this matchup. And that ultimately leads me to my predictions, because I think that overall you look at the comparisons, I think offense and defense, I think the most easy one to predict here, I think the offense definitely favors the Oilers because of how prolific the goal scoring was for them. But for the Canucks, it was more about their depth scoring, right? Seeing the series clinching goal coming from Pia Suter. JT Miller and Elias Pettersson really didn't score much in the first round against the Predators. So if they're able to turn it on and we're able to see the depth scoring, that's going to be huge for them. Elias Lindholm got a big goal for the Canucks in this series. We also saw some goal scoring from some other guys like Brock Besser, who had 4 goals in 2 games in this series. He had a hat trick. He had a couple clutch goals. So that's going to all have to continue for the Canucks. And like I said, for the Oilers, you want to see some more depth scoring. I mean, McDavid, not that he's depth scoring, but he's more of the guy passing the puck, bringing in the puck, and passing it to Hyman or Draisaitl, creating the offense that way, not necessarily putting it in the back of the net necessarily. But he's still going to be a guy that has to be on the score sheet, right? Defense, I think I'm going to give the edge to the Canucks, only because I think that the way they're going to want to play this series, maybe shutting down the Oilers' offense, like I said, that's going to be the way they win this series if they are to win it. And they're going to need Zadorov, Hughes, all the guys like Filip Hronek. They're going to need those guys to be really good defensively. And like I said, I just look at the Oilers' defense, and I look at guys like Ceci. And as much as Desharnais has been good, like Darnell Nurse, right? Like I look at those 3 defensemen in particular being on this blue line, and as much as they've been good this year down the stretch, I still am weary of that. And I think against the Canucks, like I said, more of a formidable offense. That's something that could play a factor. But overall, I think both of these teams, it's very hard to evaluate both teams' defenses. I'm just going purely off the roster. But we're going to find out by the end of this series who has the better defense. I think it's really a toss-up. And then goaltending, this is interesting because Stuart Skinner played so well in the first round. And Artur Silovs, who I expect will get the start in Game 1, he's the hot hand for the Canucks right now. But we saw Demko play Game 1. DeSmith played Games 2 and 3 for the Canucks. So the rest of the series, Game 4, 5, and 6, we saw go to Artur Silovs. And he played really well in those games. He got a shutout in Game 6. Outdueled UC Saros, so it's very much a formidable threat going into this second round series. If you're an Oilers fan, you're thinking, oh, we're going to cook this goalie. Not necessarily. Not necessarily because of what we've seen from him so far, but this is going to be a very different test for Artur Silovs, taking on the high-powered, high-potent, high-opportunistic Edmonton Oilers offense. It's going to be very interesting to see how the Oilers maybe mature from how they came into the playoffs to now a second-round matchup against the Oilers, because this is going to be a very, very different matchup from what they saw in the first round. So let's get to my prediction. So overall, I really like both of these teams. I'd love to see each of them get, and kind of, what's good for really Canada, we're going to see a Canadian representative in the Western Conference Final, depending on what happens with Toronto. Between this series, either Edmonton or Vancouver, somebody's going to go to the conference final. With that said, I think the Oilers are going to have the ability to kind of control the pace out there, control the game. And despite maybe not having more of the defensive-minded team like the Canucks do have on the blue line, I think there's enough there. I think the emergence of Bouchard, Ekholm, and really if you can just squeeze the most out of the rest of the guys like Desharnais, Ceci, Nurse, get the most out of those guys that you can. I think that's going to be what ultimately wins this series. So I have the Oilers winning this series in 6 games. I think there's too much offense there. They really impressed me in the first round this year against the Kings. Yes, the Kings are a good team, but I think for both of these teams, we're really going to be able to evaluate how good these teams are. And ultimately, I think there's going to be a situation where this series could be 2-2 or 3-1 Edmonton. And I think maybe we could see a Game 5 where Edmonton either wins this series going up 3-2, or Vancouver is going to be trying to fight back with a 3-2, making it 3-2, and then ultimately Edmonton winning it in Game 6 in Vancouver. I know that's not what Canucks fans want to hear, but this is a really good season for the Canucks. There's a season of growth for them, and I could see this being a situation that's a launching point for them going into next season. And Rick Tockett's done a very good job with this team so far. But I ultimately think that what we've seen from Edmonton this year, this is the year for the Oilers. This is do or die time for them. And I think they want to prove to a lot of people, including me, that they are capable of being an all-around complete team. They have the goaltending, they have the defense, they have the offense. I think the defense is going to be the thing we're going to want to see the most tested out of this second round. If they can I think the offense will be able to score in this series. I think the defense is going to be tested, and I think the goaltending will as well. there's going to be a little bit more tension on the defense and goaltending in this series, and we're going to be really able to evaluate that a little bit more as they potentially look at what could be an interesting matchup coming out of the Central Division. I would say, in my opinion, I don't like to say this, but I think for the Oilers, this is the year for them. You know, if you want a easier path to the Western Conference Final, playing teams like the Kings and the Canucks here is probably the easiest path that you could get. And I hate to even say that. I'm kind of, you know, discounting the Kings and the Canucks. But for the Oilers, this is their year. If they want to get it done, the time is right now. And they could be playing someone really, really difficult in the Western Conference Finals, but they got to get past this series first. They can't look ahead too much. So that's going to do it for today, guys. Thank you so much for watching. If you would like to become a member and support the channel, check out our membership program. It's every month you give a little bit of money to help support the channel. It really does help out. There's a couple of perks. You get some badges and things like that to help support the channel. It goes a long way. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. I'll see you again next time. Peace out, guys.